Before I start, I want to thanks for the invitation to come here. It's my first time here in India, so I'm very pleased to discover this country. Okay, so for today, and maybe the first lecture tomorrow morning, we present some theoretical tools we will need for the end of my lectures. Okay, so. So maybe I will present some very known facts, okay? So if you are bored, you can just sleep this morning. So we start by recall some very known facts about Gaussian vectors. So first so I just recall the Gaussian law in R. So it's just a law that has the density with respect to the Lebesgue measure that is just okay. We shall write X is following the Gaussian law, and we know that the M is just the mean of the law, and sigma squared the variance. Okay. Okay, and one of the nice property of the Gaussian laws is that they are stable with respect to affine transformation. It means that if you have a Gaussian law, if you take A, B to reals, we know that AX plus B would be a Gaussian law with mean M plus B and a variance A square sigma square. Okay, and also we know the Fourier transform of the Gaussian law, which is equal to the exponential of ETM plus exponential of sigma squared T2 divided by 2. Okay. And also, we know that if we have two independent Gaussian laws, okay, so this one would be M1 sigma 1 square, and the other one would be M2 sigma 2 square. The sum of the two Gaussian random variables that are independent, okay, that means independent. It's still a Gaussian distribution, okay? So this is some very basic fact. So what is the Gaussian vector in Rd? So X a random vector in Rd is the Gaussian vectors if for any vector T in Rd, so T will be T1, Tt, we have that, so X is a Gaussian vector if for any T in Rd we have that the scalar product between T and X is is a Gaussian real random variable, okay? And we can define the expected value of x as the vector of the expected value of each of the random variables. And the variance of x would just be the matrix where at line I and row j, you just put the covariance between the entry xi and the entry xj of your vector, okay? And we can define, we have the Fourier transform. So that will just be denoted by gamma the covariance matrix. We just have this formula. And thanks we have these formulas in the Fourier transform characterize the law. It's easy to see that the law only depends on the expected value and on the covariance matrix, okay? And we will have the same kind of property, the stability we have in transform, that is, that if we take a linear function, let's say that if we take a linear function and be a vector in R, then the vector Ix plus b is still a Gaussian vector in R, so that would be you will have as mean I of x plus b, and as covariant matrix, you will just have the covariant matrix will be the same as the preceding one multiplied by R and R transpose. So this is just the transpose of the matrix A, okay? Okay. So how can we construct Gaussian vectors? So the first important result is that if you take ideal random variable in dimension 1 with mean 0 and variance 1, then the Gaussian vector X is a Gaussian vector, and that means 0, and covariance matrix, that is the identity matrix, okay? So if you are, so now you can just transform. So to construct another Gaussian vector, you just can use this property to transform. So now if you take a matrix R, you will have that example ND. That would be B. Okay, so you can construct any Gaussian vector just starting from ID N0 on random matrices, random variables, and you transform it by this kind of application. Okay. last thing I want to recall is that if the covariance matrix is invertible, so if gamma minus 1 exists, we have a density it will be just we have the following form for the density. Okay. Any questions? So why are Gaussian vectors really important? It's mostly because of the central limit theorem that will tell us that if you take ID random variables and you take a sum, more or less you have a Gaussian variable. Okay. So before that, let me recall some basic thing about stochastic convergences. Okay, so more or less I will use let's say 3 or 4 different kinds of convergence. The first one would be so we will have the almost sure convergence. We'll have the convergence in probability, and we will have the convergence in law, and sometimes I will call that convergence in distribution. Okay, so we say that xn converges to x almost surely when n goes to infinity. If I take a look at the events of all the omega, such that so you take a look at the events of all the omega such that xn of omega, so that would just be a sequence of vector in Harder or real, so it's a classic convergence. Okay, and you take a look at the probability of that. That should be 1. Okay, we say that xn converges to x in probability. When n goes to infinity, if for any epsilon, if you take a look at the probability that the distance between okay, so you can choose any distance you want on RD, since they are all equivalent, it will be the same. And so if you take a look at the probability of the distance between xn and x, larger than epsilon, this probability goes to 0 when n goes to infinity. Okay, and last thing, so we say that xn converge to X in low if for any vector T in our Rd, okay, so I will explain in a second what is the meaning of Xn smaller than T. If the property that Xn is smaller than T converge to the property that X and that for so you don't have to have this property for any T, but just for the point T that are continuity point of the limiting function. Okay? And what is the meaning of so I say that X is smaller than T, that will just be, I mean that you want that each coordinate is smaller than the coordinate of the second vector. Okay? So sometimes it's not easy to see that something converges in law using this property. So there are several characterization of equivalent characterization of the convergence in law. Okay, so there's something that I won't write it on the blackboard. I would just give you the name. It's called portmanteau. So if you want to have a several characterization, you go. It's in the first chapter of the book of Van der Waart, okay, asymptotic statistics. I will just give you one of the characterizations we use the most is by the theorem of Paul Levy. So. Tells you more or less that we have equivalence between so the Paul-Levy's theorem tells you that you have equivalence between the convergence in distribution and the convergence of the characteristic function. Okay, and in fact it's more powerful than that because in fact you have something more convergent that tells you that so it tells you that if you have if the sequence of the characteristic function of of some vector xn converge to a function phi t that is continuous. And in that case, so it's a very powerful theorem because you just need to see the convergence of phi xn of t. If it converges to some function that is continuous of 0, then you have convergence in law. Okay? You know that there exists a random variable that has this function as characteristic function. Okay? You don't know to know in advance what would be the limit. Okay? You just have to find that it's converged and study the continuity at 0 of your limiting function. Okay? Okay, so okay, so now we can study one of the two main theorems in the theory of probability, that is the strong law of large number and the central limit theorem. So so what tells you the strong law of large number? Right. It says that if you take a sequence of IID random variable x1, x2, x, and so on, such that they are integrable. Okay, in that case, we have the empirical mean of the random variables converge so the empirical mean converges to the theoretical mean. Okay, so it's a very useful theorem in statistics because it gives you a way to have some nice estimator of quantities. Okay, so if you want to estimate the expectation of someone, you just have to take the empirical means of IID sample. Okay. And the second one, that would be the central limit. Okay, so okay, here I directly announce the theorem in dimension t. Okay, so again, if you take IID random variables, okay, so now we have a stronger assumption that is x1 as a covariance matrix. Okay, then okay, you take a look of xn bar exactly as the theorem. You subtract the almost sure limit. Okay, so that goes to 0, obviously. Okay, so this one want to go to 0. Okay, so you want to compensate the 0, okay, to see what is happening. Okay, so you hope that if you multiply this by something that goes to infinity, the plus infinity and the 0 will compensate, and you will see something happening. Okay, so here you know that the good scaling is square root of n. So this one goes to infinity, this one goes to 0. The infinity and 0 compensate, and what you have at the end, you obtain a Gaussian vector of dimension d that is center and has as limit the covariance matrix of one of your vectors. Okay. Okay, so we just give maybe the idea of the proofs. The proof of this theorem is really easy if you have if you assume that your random variable have a power of 4 that is integrable, because in that case you just use a Markov inequality and a Borel-Cantelli lemmas to conclude. Okay, so. Markov and Borel-Cantelli. Okay. And if you just use the minimal hypothesis, what you have to do, you have to truncate your random variables to some level m. Okay, so you replace. So you replace your random variables by x1, the indicator function by x1 is smaller than m. In that case, this one will have this property. So you will have the result for this one, and then you have to let go m to infinity and show that everything is okay. Okay, so this part is a little bit technical. Okay, this part is easy, but this one is. So let me just write the proof in dimension 1. So the proof is just an application of Paul-Lévy theorem. Okay, so you just compute so before just before doing that. You can always assume with a plus of generality that your random variables are centered and with variance 1. If they are not, you just repeat x by x minus m divided by sigma, and you have a variable that is centered and with variance 1. Okay, okay, so now we assume that, and we compute the characteristic function of okay. So now you just use that the exponential of the sum is the product of the exponential, and then you use the independence of the variables to say that the expected value of the product is the product of the expected value, and at the end what you have is just, since they have exactly the same law, you will just have exponential of et x1 divided by n at the power n, okay? And then you just do okay, so you just use that e of t at 0 is 1 plus t plus 1 plus t plus t squared divided by 2 plus a small o, okay? So when you do that here, what happens? For the t here, when you take the expectation, since m equals to 0, here you will have 0. Okay, so at the end you have 1 plus t squared divided by n e of x1 squared. So you can write that, it will be easier. So what you get, at the end what you get, you have something like that. T squared 2n square okay, and you know that 1 plus x divided by n to the power n, that will goes to the exponential or something, okay? I have e, so here I have minus 1, sorry, because when you put e to the power 2, that will be minus 1, okay? So that will simply go to and there you just recognize the characteristic function of the n01 Gaussian law. Okay? So here, and if you want to have the proof in dimension d, you just do a product scalar of your vector with some vector in the Rd and apply the term in dimension 1, and you have your result. Okay? So this gives some basic application, some classical application of these two theorem test statistics. Imagine that you have some observations that are IDs, random variable that have the Poisson distribution with parameter theta. Okay, that just means that okay, that property that x1 is equals to k is exponential minus theta to the power k divided by factorial k. Okay. So you want to estimate theta. Okay, so the first thing is the strong law of large number. Tells you that tells you that xn bar goes homoscedastic to theta, so this is so xn bar, you can think that it is a nice estimator of theta, okay, because when large goes to infinity, it converges to the unknown parameter. Okay, and the central limit theorem tells you that okay, the central limit theorem tells you that the rate of convergence is square root of n, okay? And when you have that, you can do we can build a confidence interval for theta, okay? So if you want to build a confidence interval for theta, here we have a problem. Why? Because the limiting variance is theta here, okay? Because the variance of a Poisson variable is theta. Okay? So the problem is that you cannot build your confidence interval because you have here the variance that is unknown. Okay, you can put this one here if you want by saying that but again here if you do that, it's the same problem because you have here something that is unknown, so you cannot compute that in practice, okay? So what you can do is you can use what is called the Slutsky lemma. So what does it say? It says that if you have something that converges in law to x, okay, and if you have another sequence so what is important in my theorem is that so you have a sequence that converges to x, and then you have yn that converges to c, where c here is deterministic, is not a random variable. Okay, here I can have a random variable, but it's important that I have a constant. Then for any function, you have that for any combination of xn and yn, you have convergence here to the same combination of x and c. Okay, so okay, so for the use of that. Okay, so this is the central limit theorem where I just put the limit invariance here. Okay, so that you construct an estimator of the sigma square root of sigma. Sorry, you construct an estimation of sigma x squared. So for example, you take the empirical. Okay, so you take an estimator of the variance. So we know that thanks to the strong law of large number applying twice here, you have that sigma n square converges to sigma square almost surely. Okay, since the convergence here almost surely implies the convergence in probability, you will have this thing. Okay. So now you just so you can if you so now we can replace here sigma square by sigma n square. In fact, to Stokesky lemma, we will have the same limit. Okay. So in, the application is that here you will replace square root of theta by square root. So now we can replace that by square root of xn bar, and we'll have still the same limiting distribution. Okay, and now we can build confidence interval because these are non-numbers. Okay. Okay. So let me give you the second application, and that the second example that will motivate the introduction of the delta method. So now imagine that you have a sample of random variables that are ID with exponential distribution of parameter theta. Okay, so that means that the density here is so we have the density on the positive real numbers, that is theta exponential minus theta x. Okay. So again, we want to estimate theta. Okay. What do we know thanks to the law of large number is that so if you have an exponential distribution, the mean value is 1 over theta. So we know that xn bar converges almost surely to 1 over theta. Okay. So what will be the idea here is to take as estimator of theta 1 over xn bar. Okay. Yes. The first point is that we have that 1 over xn bar converges to 1 over theta by the continuous mapping theorem. So what is that theorem? It just tells you, so the continuous mapping theorem, let me just write it here. tells you that if you have a convergence, that is, could be in low in probability of almost surely, if you have a continuous function, f, then you have that f of x, xn converges to f of x with the same convergence. So that if you have convergence in low here, you have convergence in low here. If you have convergence probability here, you have and so on. Okay. So now we know that 1 over xn bar converges to 1 over theta. So now the question is, now the question is, do we still have the same rate of convergences, that is square root of n? And what limit do we have if we have the rate square root of n? Okay. The point is that xn bar is an empirical mean, okay, but 1 divided by xn bar is not an empirical mean. Okay. So here we cannot apply directly the central limit theorem. Okay. So what we know is that so applying the central limit theorem, we will have the square root of xn bar minus 1 over theta, sorry. Converges in low to n0 theta 1 over. That would be the var. Okay. And we want to replace xn bar by 1 over xn bar n. Okay.
So,
yeah.
So by applying continuous mapping theorem,
yeah.
So 1 by xn bar goes to 1 by theta, or is it just theta?
What did I do? It's 1 over xn bar? Yes, you are right. Sorry. This one. Thank you. Okay, so in some sense here we want to use the application f of x is 1 over x. Okay. If I do that, what I can say is that So what is true is that you can say that f of this one converges to f of this one with 1 over x is continuous. Okay, it's a continuous function. Okay, but what we want to do is to say that, so that will not be true, okay? Can I say that? Can I write this equality here? For what kind of function can I write this equality? So this is true. Okay, so that will be true if f is a linear function, okay? Obviously 1 over x is not a linear function, okay? So what will tell you what will tell us the delta method theorem is that here we can replace f by its linear approximation that is just is differential. Okay, so we need an assumption that tells you that f has a derivative. Okay, in that case, so if so I could have that, but the price to pay is that so more or less here I will have to put the derivative of the function. Okay. Okay, so the theorem is easy now to write. So okay, so you have a let's say you have a sequence of random vectors. Okay, I have a function you have a function phi from R cut to RD that is differentiable. Okay. Tn minus wait theta. Okay, so if you have something that tells you that for a sequence, so n goes to infinity. So here you have to think n equals square root of n, okay? So if you have something that tells you that n, tn minus t goes to some random variable in t in low, okay, then so you can use this inequality here, okay? But the price to pay is that at the end you will not have f, you will have the differential f. So we will just have the differential f of theta applying to the limit. Okay, so if you apply this to our example, what you get now in our example, you apply the delta method now, so you have square root of n. Okay, so now you will have, so okay, so you apply it at point theta, so now you will have, so you just multiplied the Gaussian law. So, but you apply it at point 1 over theta, okay? You apply it at this point, that is 1 over theta. So here I will have theta square and 0. Okay? But what happens if I multiply a Gaussian law by just a number? I will have the Gaussian law, and I just change the variance. So this is equal in distribution to the n0 theta to the power 4. Okay? You just multiply the variance by the square of the coefficient. So by theta to the power 4. So I have, sorry, theta to the power 2. Okay? Okay, so okay. So imagine that you have an ID sample of some with some distribution f, and you want to estimate the median of your distribution. Okay. So so my exercise so you can take the empirical median. Okay. So the exercise is to show that you have is to show that your empirical median, you have a central limit theorem, that means the square root of n, the empirical median minus the true median goes to the Gaussian. Okay, so I think we have some practical session on I don't know, Wednesday or Tuesday, something like that. Yeah. So you can try to solve this exercise, and if you don't, we can talk about the correction on Wednesday. Okay. If you excuse me, I have to go to the bathroom. Sorry. It's